From Olympic City and the home of Pikes Peak, this is the Automotive ADHD Show. All right, here we are, rocking it on the Automotive ADHD Show, heard around the world as a podcast, and on the radio in Southern Colorado, 91.7 KLZR, voice of the Wet Mountain Valley. My name is Matt West. I am here to talk about cars, and hopefully you are here to listen to talk about cars, because that's what this is about. This is a show about cars, and I have some fun stuff in the works for you. Loaded show. I also have some cool news for Patreon subscribers. This is particularly exciting, so that is we'll get to that here in one of the later segments of the show. But that's it's going to be cool. It's going to be cool. If you're on the Patreon, this is good news for you, and if you're not on the Patreon, this might be a reason to get on it. So anyway, it's that's a lot of fun. Now, we got a lot of things to talk about today. Ford says they will sell you new tunes, not musical tunes, but as in, tunes for your Ford Bronco, performance tunes, fuel maps, all sorts of nerdy stuff. They will sell you some factory-backed, warranty-backed tunes. And this could be really cool, especially if you own one of the four-banger Broncos. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about why I think that four-cylinder version is probably the best Bronco to get right now. Also, Ford has some weird opinions about pedestrians and pedestrian safety. So we'll also touch on that. Two Ford stories today. We're going to talk about a 9,000 RPM Toyota Prius track car monster thing. It's cool. It's cool. I had no idea you could turn a Prius into this, and you can, and we should all do it. Absolutely. We're also going to talk about a come-and-swapped Tesla that a prominent YouTuber is doing, but not so much the Tesla. We will hit more on how that relates to the RPM Act. So this is something that is important for all of us. I've touched on the RPM Act on the show before, and I'm going to go over it in some more depth today. How this relates to a come-and-swapped Tesla as well. That is, of course, all good stuff. And we need more come-and-swap Teslas. That's one thing we need. So, and the RPM Act is going to protect that. Now, if you missed last week's show, well, you're missing out. Come on, catch up with it. It's really good. You don't want to miss out. Last week's show, I had Emmy Award-winning television producer and the director of the Last Independent Automaker, which is a documentary series about American Motors, one of my favorite car companies. And this is really cool. This documentary series is going to be coming out on PBS. It's going to be on television. It's going to be on streaming, and it's going to be cool. And I had a one-on-one interview with myself and Joe Ligo last week. So if you missed out on that, well, you're missing out. So go listen to it after this show. Go back one episode in your podcast feed, and you definitely want to listen to it. It's super cool. We go into all sorts of great history about American Motors, who they are, what they do, and that's all really cool. So anyway, one thing I want to get started with here, before we talk about Ford and their new Bronco stuff and the tunes for the new Broncos, this is funny. I like this. So there was a guy, and a guy in the United Kingdom, and the other day he decided to, it was after work, he wanted to get a ride from work to one of the clubs to go hit the bars, hit the pubs with a couple of his buddies. So he did the sensible thing, which is getting an Uber for that. Now, I am not a big fan of taking Ubers. Every time I've had to take an Uber or a cab or a Lyft, insert whatever rideshare brand you want, it's always been begrudgingly because, come on. I've got like 6 cars that sometimes run, and usually at least one of them is running enough to drive to work, to drive wherever. And so I usually prefer driving myself. That's why I'm a car guy. That's what I do. But that said, he made the sensible decision to take a cab. If he was going to go out and do a night of drinking, I would do the same. Now, those who know me really well know I really don't drink. That's not my scene. That's, each to their own on that. But you know what? I support the idea that if you're going to go drinking, don't be driving. Don't drive at all. And that's what rideshare, that's what cabs, that's what Uber is for. So he did the right thing. But this is where it diverges because his Uber was about 15 minutes. The ride itself was about, in duration, 15 minutes, and it was 4 miles. He woke up the next morning, and he noticed a bill, namely an overdraft charge on his account. He wakes up hungover, a hazy recollection of the night before, and he sees an Uber bill for £35,000, which breaks down to 37,000 US dollars in change, and 37 grand for an Uber ride. And he's probably thinking, man, how far did I drive in there? Where did I go? No, he only went 4 miles. And so he calls up Uber and says, hey, something seems fishy. And they look at it and they go, yeah, you're right. Something was fishy. And they had one of their engineering teams look at it who said that the issue, at least as far as they can tell, was that the town in the UK he was in also shared the name with another town in Australia. And for whatever reason, in the computerized brain of the system that Uber uses, it decided that he had driven in the span of 15 minutes from a town in Australia to a pub in the United Kingdom, and it calculated the fare based on the mileage for that. And not to mention that, he drove across the ocean. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. It was $37,000 to do that. In case you're wanting to actually do that trip from Australia to the UK via Uber, just so you know, it's about 37 grand. Just be aware of that. If you decide this is what you want to do, I won't stop you. I would recommend against doing it. Now, this made me think of some things. Now, Uber refunded him that money. Or rather canceled the charge. He said that he did not have 35,000 British pounds in his account, so it was not going to take that out because it just wasn't there. But here's the thing, right? This brings me to the question of ride sharing. And I know this is not a thing that you do. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I like to think if you're listening to this show, you are probably a car enthusiast. You're probably a fan of cars, and either you drive or you just like cars, right? Some of my listeners are younger. They can't drive yet, but they listen because they love cars, which is also cool. They write into the show. They're fantastic. Dylan, by the way, younger listener, and he's super cool. Loves the show as well. So shout out to him. But that being said, with this, imagine if you're one of those people living in the city and you're ride sharing everywhere you go. And so imagine this. You've got a say $10. We'll say it's $10. I think what he paid was 10 pounds, which would be 11 and some change US dollars for 4 miles. But let's make it simple. Let's say it's $10 for 5 miles. And then let's say you have I'm coming up with some arbitrary numbers for the sake of argument. Say you have a 10-mile commute every day. So it's 5 miles there, 5 miles back, 5 miles to work, 5 miles back. You're ride sharing. It's in the city or whatever. That's why the distance isn't very far. Out here in Colorado, your commute's usually, we're in the kind of in a wider area. Your commute's usually going to be more than 5 miles. But again, let's just keep it simple. So that's 10 miles a day, which $10 for 5 miles, that's going to be $20 to do that 10 miles every day. Multiply that by 7 days a week, 5 days a week working, and say on Saturday, Sunday, you go to the bar to go hang out with some friends, and that's also 5 miles there and 5 miles back. So that comes out to $20 a day times 7 days a week times 4 weeks in a month is $560 a month. That's like $6,700 a year, $6,720. Now let's say that's basically 70 miles, right? So that's 70 miles a week, $560 a month. Now imagine you've got a car that's 70 miles a week, and let's just assume you get 22 miles to the gallon. And at that 22 miles to the gallon, you're going to burn 3.1 gallons every week. See, I did the math here. I came prepared. 3.1 gallons every week, and that's going to be at $3.75 a gallon. Arbitrary number. That's just what I filled up at yesterday. So we're gonna use that number. Results may differ wherever you are, but that's $11.62 per week. $11.62, which breaks down to $46.48 a month. Wow, that's a lot cheaper than $560 a month. But wait, you do need a car to drive. And now so that's just the fuel cost. The average car payment, somewhere between $450 and $500 a month, which is a lot of money. That's the kind of the national average. There's a few different numbers when you look that up, but that's a good national average. And $450 a month is a nice car. Let me put it that way. That is not a beater car. That is not a car like any of mine, except maybe my Tacoma, my daily driver. That's nicer. Not to mention I messed up the clutch the other week, but hey, don't worry about it, right? But anyway, so that's a nicer car, okay? That's a car. It's going to have air conditioning. It's going to have stereo. It's going to have power windows, like car stuff that you want. So anyway, that let's say $450 a month, $46.48 a month in gas. You're at $496 a month, which is $64 cheaper every month than if you were taking the Uber. Now, obviously, Uber rates vary depending on where you are. Like if you look it up, you don't get like just a flat rate. They're going to vary. It might be a little cheaper here and there, might not be. I'm just kind of going off of the guideline that, the basis of what this guy was paying for an Uber in the inner city, right? So anyway, that's $64 a month cheaper than the Uber. So you're saving $64 a month. But here's a crazy concept. This is mind-blowing, right? At the end of that, you have a car. You have an entire car. You can go take it wherever else you want to go, and you can do that because that's just how much it's costing you to get to work and back. 7 days a week working back, then hanging out with friends on the weekend. But you have a car at the end of the day. So you want to plan a week-long vacation. You want to go drive across country. Cool, you got a car. You could do that. Yeah, you want to go help a friend move some stuff. You want to go, maybe you have some dogs. Maybe you got pets. You can put them inside that car and drive around and drive your pets with you. Amazing concept. I mean, like you could spend that money and have a car at the end of the day. That's what gets me with people who live in the really inner cities. And again, I know this isn't you. And even if you do live in a deep city, you have an appreciation for cars. But these are the people who live deep in the city and say, yeah, I don't need a car. I don't want a car. Why do I need a car? Now, granted, if you're walking to work, if you're cycling to work, I get it. That's cheaper, no matter what. But this is for the people who, and they exist. They ride share everywhere they go. Yeah, I don't need a car. I just ride share. What's the point? And yeah, sure. I'm glossing over the fact that you do have maintenance on that car, and that's an amount you should budget for. But generally speaking, on a nice newer car, an average used car, 5 to 10 years old, $450 a month car payment. On average, your maintenance isn't going to be that terrible. And if you buy something inherently reliable to begin with, you're not going to be forking out $6,000 for entire, motor and transmission swaps because you grenaded it or doing whatever. That's not as much of a concern. So yeah, there you go. Now that's also glossing over insurance and a few other things. I know we're doing this for the sake of argument. The point is, relatively speaking, you can, even with say insurance cost and all of that, you could ride share for the same price as you could buy a car. But if you buy the car, you also have a car. At the end of the ride sharing, you spend that $560 for the month, and you spent the money. Like that's just how much it costs to get there. You have nothing left over to show for that. So anyway, I hold my peace there. Moral of the story, I'll say it here. You heard it here first. Get a car. Moral of the story, get a car. So anyway, what sort of advice were you expecting from an automotive podcast and radio show? What were you expecting me to say? What? Keep ride sharing? Of course not. No, that's not what this is about. So anyway, hey, speaking of getting a car, if you are interested in getting a car, perhaps a new Ford Bronco, this is cool. I want to transition to this because Ford has said that they are going to start offering performance tunes for the Bronco. I like this because performance tunes for anything are cool, and this is cool. But now specifically, they're offering factory-backed, warranty-backed performance tunes for the 4-cylinder Bronco, not the 6-cylinder one. Why the 4-cylinder? Because the 4-cylinder, it's a turbocharged 4-cylinder. Gone are the days of the 4-cylinder's the economy option. Oh, I had to get it because I couldn't afford the V6 or the V8. Oh, I had to get it because I wanted the gas mileage. No, the 4-cylinders now are great. They make a lot of power. Turbos are fantastic, but it's also good for tunability, especially when you have a turbocharged engine, such as in the 4-cylinder Bronco, because when you're trying to make power naturally aspirated, it's expensive, and you reach a point of diminishing returns. My point with this is that if you were to, so let me go back here. Let me start it by saying that this tune brings you 30 extra horsepower, not a lot, but 60 pound-feet of torque, especially through the low RPMs, the mid-range. This is not a peaky high RPM motor like my, say my S2000 that makes about 2 torques and some horsepower under 8,000 RPM. No, this isn't that. No, this makes meaty torque in the low range. And what's interesting is it makes a good chunk of power. It goes up to 330 horsepower and 385 pound-feet of torque. And we're talking really reasonable power from a 4-cylinder, and all that torque is in the low end, which makes it, because that turbo is going to spool early, it's going to make it feel a lot like the 6-cylinder. Usually, if you go with the 4-cylinder turbo option, it's going to be a little peakier, but you can change a lot of the dynamics of an engine based on its turbo configuration and the tuning and stuff. And that is what they are doing. And I think this performance tune, it's $850 for the tune, by the way. But, and also if you get the automatic transmission variant, it adjusts shift points and other things like that. But why would you get the automatic transmission? The 4-cylinder is the only one that is offered with the manual, and what a cool manual transmission it is. It's a 7-speed manual. You have gears 1 through 6 like normal, but to the left of first gear, you've got an extra low crawler gear, which is, it's an off-roader. Come on, that's good, right? We want that. So, and the thing is that manual transmission is not offered on the 6-cylinder model. Tragically not offered on the 6-cylinder model, I should add. But the fact is that you can get very near the 6-cylinder performance with the 4-cylinder with a factory-backed, factory-warranted tune. Now, obviously, I'm a big proponent for modifying cars. Yeah, you can modify it cheaper, probably. But you get the factory backing with this. And honestly, getting a custom tune, at least, if you get like a standard, like an access port or like a Cobb, tuner, and you plug that in and you use one of their pre-built tunes, yeah, that's fine. Costs maybe a little less, but you don't have the factory support. You definitely void the warranty. Now, if you were to go to the opposite end of the spectrum and go with a full standalone ECU and a custom tune from a dyno shop and, a good tuner, that runs you thousands of dollars. So $850 to get you near V6 performance. Yeah, turbo engines can be really tunable from their stock state because they typically come detuned a little bit from the factory, and you just got to adjust timing, adjust your fuel map a little bit, and adjust boost within reason, and you can make a pretty substantial boost in power. Like I was mentioning with naturally aspirated engines, is that to make 30 extra horsepower and 60 pound-feet of torque, that's at very least doing a custom exhaust manifold, a header, an intake manifold as well, in addition to maybe a cam. You'd probably get a little more gains out of it, depending on the platform. But generally speaking, those are ways you can increase airflow, increase air into the engine through the intake manifold, increase the time the valves are open and pulling that air in through the cam, and then getting that out as well through a better exhaust. That's what you have with the naturally aspirated engine outside of changing displacement and doing a stroker. And then at that point, you're taking apart the engine. You're spending thousands of dollars, tons of labor for, again, a realistically small bump in power. Modern, computerized, fuel-injected, small displacement turbo engines from the factory, very simple to make that 30, 40, 50, maybe even 100 extra horsepower in comparison. And that's what's cool. Now, if I were to spec out a new Bronco, I'm not, but if I were, I would have the 4-cylinder one with the manual transmission, because why else would you buy it? You have to, come on, that manual's too cool to not buy. And then I would get it in the 2-door, because I feel like the 4-door is just kind of chunky, especially if you got this 4-cylinder, you got this power, you got the manual. I would rather have the lighter, more nimble one. I can huck it around on the dirt roads and on the trails, get it sideways, have a little more fun, and all around have just a fun car. I would like that. The 4-cylinder Bronco would not be a bad option, in my opinion. Also, considering the 6-cylinder variants have been having a number of issues in service bulletins and recalls and related to the 6-cylinder drivetrain at the moment. So, though that'll probably get sorted out. So, anyway, yeah, there you go. Isn't that cool? I like to see that Ford is doing some factory-backed stuff. That is fun. Their performance department clearly likes this sort of thing. Also, getting that tune, if you have the manual version, enables auto rev matching, which is kind of fun. I prefer doing my own rev matching, but hey, while we're at it, might as well add some more fun stuff into the car there. And no, that's good. That is good. I like what Ford's doing in that regard. So that's why we will get on to what they're doing. That's kind of weird. They're doing something else kind of weird. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about a 9,000 RPM Prius that's on the way right here.
At the Speed Council, getting things done fast is our priority. We do everything fast, from driving, working, sleeping, and eating.
Someone help, he's choking!
This is Tim.
Hello.
And by the time this ad is over, he'll have bicycled across the earth 69 times. Nice. Even if our name sounds unfamiliar, you know our work. F1? Pfft, child's play. The world's first supersonic jet? Yup, that was us. Apollo 11? Also us. The fastest animal in the sea? Hell, we even wrote the Wikipedia article. Fast. And we're so dedicated to speed that we've genetically engineered the world's first hyperspeed speed machine. With this scientific breakthrough, you can download your favorite automotive podcast a whole day early. How's that for fast? Patreon.com/Throttle Warrior. Donate now. Download the show early and receive special perks. This message approved by the Speed Council and the Church of Fast Things.
Oh yeah, here we are rocking it for the second segment of the Automotive ADHD Show, heard around the world as a podcast and on the radio in Southern Colorado. My name is Matt West, here to talk about cars, and that car sound was courtesy of Aaron. He sent that in earlier. That is his 1995 Nissan 240SX, and it's a little modified, got a different turbo. He says it makes about 320 horsepower, and he was doing some fun donuts, some fun burnouts, all of the above. But you see, those weren't just regular donuts. Those were wedding donuts. Yeah, he took that out for a spin on his wedding day and just destroyed some tires. I mean, yeah, you seal the deal with the ring, but you really make it real by destroying some tires. I love that. I mean, come on. If you are having a wedding and you're not doing burnouts at some point, either before, during, or after the wedding, are you really having a wedding? Are you really getting married? You got to think about this. I'm just saying. So, yeah, that's what he did. Also, congratulations on being married. But, yeah, that's doing the right thing on a wedding. You could hear, I imagine the folks at the wedding were very enthusiastic with that, too. You could hear the cheering there at the end of that clip. So that's awesome. Aaron, you are entered for a chance to win the Automotive ADHD keychain, as well as the sticker and a $25 parts store gift card. And speaking of the keychains, I just got some new ones in. I restocked on them. I have a lot more now than I started with. So that is very cool. I will be shipping these out. And that also brings me to another exciting piece of information for my Patreon subscribers. So if you are a current supporter on Patreon, and you should be if you're not, but if you are, I want to thank you for supporting the show as well, and kind of give you an extra benefit on being on the Patreon. So if you are a current supporter of the Patreon, message me through Patreon, a good mailing address, and I will send you a keychain for free because I want to thank you, and you're awesome, and you supporting the show on Patreon makes things like the keychains, the stickers, all of that stuff possible. Makes it possible for me to take time and go interview Jimmy Ford at the Pikes Peak Hill Climb. You know, I did that over the summer. It was awesome. I couldn't have done it without Patreon. So be a part of that. But before you say, well, I'm not on the Patreon, that doesn't apply to me. If you sign up to the Patreon in the month of October, I'll also send you a keychain. So, you know, just something to think about. Check it out. Patreon subscribers get early access to the show. They also get exclusive posts, a little bit of behind-the-scenes fun stuff, and exclusive episodes. A couple Patreon exclusive episodes I have that are up there right now. So you should definitely check that out. Patreon.com/Throttle Warrior. So very good stuff. Get the keychains are awesome. I got them in the mail, by the way. I love how they look. They're embroidered, they're high quality, they're nice. Folks who have already received the last batch of keychains for winning in the Car Sound giveaway, which previously was the only way you could get the keychains, already have said nice things about them. So I am happy with that. And I'm also working on a store so you can just buy them as well. But I have to get the logistics and the website of that sorted out. All in due time. It will happen. So let's talk about Ford a little bit more. Last segment, I was talking about how they are doing cool stuff with performance tunes for the Bronco and how I like the 4-cylinder Bronco with the manual and now the performance tune. That's even better. That's cool. This must be a different department of Ford because this is weird. This is odd, okay? So, and again, must be a different department, but what they're doing, they are at least pursuing a noble cause. They want to reduce pedestrian injuries and incidents that involve pedestrian crashes, which is a noble cause because, it sucks. Any pedestrian versus vehicle-related incident sucks, especially if you're the pedestrian. That's not fun. You don't want to be there. And especially with modern trucks, with the grills are so tall. SUVs are all, big front chunky grills. And yeah, that's no fun. You don't want to think about it. Now, what Ford is doing, though, that's a noble cause. But what they're doing is how they're going about it, I find a little weird. Now, newer Ford vehicles already have a system called Ford Co-Pilot 360, which can, warn the driver when pedestrians step out, bicyclists, scooter riders, motorcyclists, though I won't lump you motorcyclists into the same category as pedestrians. That would be rude. You're on a motorcycle. Come on. But that said, it detects all of these things to varying degrees of success, and they want to improve that. Now, the way they want to improve it is a little suspect to me because they said, aha, here's what we'll do. We will make an app for your smartphone. And if you have that app, then that app will communicate through Bluetooth low energy technology. It is constantly broadcasting, to other devices that have that. It's kind of pinging it out. It'll communicate to cars on the road that you're nearby, and it'll alert the Ford Co-Pilot system. Yeah, that's cool and all. The problem is this is expecting the pedestrians to have the app. And this brings all sorts of issues. What if you're a pedestrian and you don't have the app? You're walking to, you say, hey, I'm going to go walk to the convenience store, grab a bag of chips. And that's all you're doing. You're not thinking about, before I do, I should download Ford's app because it's a Ford app. What if you don't even have a car? I know some people like that exist. Those are those people in the beginning of the show I was talking about with the Uber stuff who take Ubers every day. Yeah, those people. Yeah, they're weird, right? But I mean, look, you might not have a car, so downloading the Ford app might be a little counterintuitive. Also, putting that on there it brings up an interesting legal question, okay? So Ford is no stranger to lawsuits and things like that. Look at the Ford Pinto back in the 70s. Look at the Ford Explorer during the 1980s, and you'll see what I mean. That being said, what if, and this is a hypothetical, but what if you're a pedestrian and you get clobbered by an F-150, but you survive, you're okay, you recover, you're good, but you want to sue Ford, and you want to sue the driver of that vehicle for whatever reason, or you sue Ford, or any person involved. Well, Ford, their legal team, I just see this as a hypothetical. Their legal team might say, well, there was actually a way to prevent this. If you had downloaded the Ford app prior to your incident, you would not have actually been involved in that. And so I don't know if that has any legal weight. I don't know if that has any relevance in that sense, but it's a possibility. Ford might. This is one way for them to shift the blame to the pedestrian rather than the driver, and that brings up a lot of questions legally and morally, and that again is kind of weird. Now, here's another thought: what if you get clobbered by you download the app? You say, I'm a smart pedestrian. I'm going to download the Ford app. And then you get clobbered by a Chevy because you didn't have the Chevy app. No, you only had the Ford one. Come on. So maybe is there going to be a central app? I don't know. Maybe. maybe there would be. It's just the whole point is you shouldn't have the burden of this be on the pedestrian themselves. You should develop your system to better handle pedestrians in different conditions on board on the car. Also, because you can't expect every pedestrian to download the app. You can't expect every pedestrian to have a smartphone. Vast numbers of incidents involving cars, motor vehicles, and pedestrians unfortunately happen with homeless people. A lot of them are not in the right mind. They're on drugs. They jump out into traffic in the city. A lot of that happens. I'm not sitting in front of statistics with that, but I can just tell you a lot of times that happens. I've even had someone who was that has personally happened to me. And in fact, any of the close calls I've had as a driver have been with very clearly, I would say not even homeless people, but really methed out, drug addicts jumping in the road. That's happened to me twice in about 6 years, but it has happened. And so the point is making the burden of the technology be on, the pedestrian has the app will communicate to the car won't hit the pedestrian. That's fundamentally flawed. The system needs to be self-contained within the car. End of story. That's just how that has to be. So that's what I think about that. And I think it's weird that Ford's doing this. Volvo also did this as well with a smart bicycle helmet it was just a prototype system that would communicate with the Volvo. It would communicate to the smartphone, then to the car. And again, great idea. The benefit of the smart bicycle helmet is it can at least protect your head when the car does hit you. At that very much. It can do that. The smartphone app is not going to do nearly as much for your own health should it fail and you get clobbered by a car anyway. The bicycle helmet, at least you got a little protection on the dome, you got a little bit of cushioning there. I still wouldn't want to be ran over by especially a Volvo. Volvos are tanks. Are you kidding? Gosh. I mean, yeah, sure, they're more designed for pedestrian safety these days, but I mean, imagine being hit by like a Volvo 240 from the 80s or the early 90s. I mean, imagine that. I mean, that would be the equivalent of being run over by like 3 or 4 trains simultaneously. That would really not be good. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. But the problem with the Volvo Smart Bicycle helmet, though it is safer than the cell phone itself, which doesn't do anything to protect you in a crash. The problem is it still is the burden of the pedestrian. It is the burden of the person most vulnerable here to have spent the money on the expensive smart helmet and also have a smartphone on them. I don't know about you. I do enjoy cycling. Imagine that. I'm a car guy and I enjoy cycling, right? But I do. I enjoy mountain biking and stuff. I don't honestly have my phone with me when I cycle sometimes, especially if I'm going for a short ride. I don't like it in my pocket when I'm riding the bicycle. Now, if I'm out on a big mountain biking trip, I got a backpack and I got some other gear and I have it with me. That's just, hey, that's neither here nor there. So yeah, Ford doing that's a little weird in my opinion. So yeah, plus on the tunes for the Broncos, minus on the weird pedestrian thing, which I guess levels out to they cancel each other out, and it's just neutral. I don't know. I don't know how you would stack that up. Now, I promised I would tell you about the 9,000 RPM Toyota Prius. Now, it's not exactly a Prius. It's maybe a little bit of a stretch. In fact, it's smaller and weirder than a Prius. It is a Toyota Echo there is Prius in it. It has a Prius engine. So there's a guy in New Zealand, and he goes by the name David Vanderhaas, and he's an avid track enthusiast, and he decided that he wanted to do something to have as a fun backup track car. He already has a different track car, but he wanted something cheap and fun as the backup track car, which I understand that. If you break your track car, you want another track car while you fix the first track car. I'm totally there with you. I get that. So he bought, for super cheap, a 2005 Toyota Echo, which I guess in the United States it would be more like a Yaris. I don't know. It's a small 2-door hatchback micro car thing. It is tiny. It is smaller than a Prius. And what he did, instead of the sensible thing like swapping in a legendary Toyota 4A GE or the 3S GTE Beams or a 3S GTE or something, something of like an MR2 or whatever. Instead of that, no, he swapped in. And I am familiar with my Toyota engine designations. I know them. I like to think at least that I know them pretty well. And I know the meaning behind them and what they designate. They all mean something, be it fuel injected, be it the number of cylinders, be it the, turbo, whatever. This one's a little out there. The Prius engine from a 2016 Prius. It's called the 1NZ-FXE. 1NZ-FXE. It doesn't roll off the tongue quite as easily as 2JZ or even 2JZ GTE. It's not the same. But that being said, he got it for $400, and he wanted this to be a low buck build. So he got it for $400 at a junkyard. Prius engine. Bear in mind, the Prius obviously is a hybrid electric drivetrain, but it does have a more conventional gas engine that powers it. And what he did is he took it out, bought he bought a transmission, a 5-speed transmission for $120 from the same junkyard that he got the engine at, and then got a set of wheels for another $120, got some not drag slicks, but track slicks, racing slicks for really cheap as well, used, it's someone else's spares, and then he put this whole thing together, put a cam in this with a standalone ECU and ITBs. Individual throttle bodies. I love ITBs. As an owner of a car with ITBs, you should I will tell you, if you don't own a car with ITBs, you have to at some point. They're fantastic. Not only do they increase response, not only do you actually get a little bit of a boost in the air velocity going through the velocity stacks. We actually measured that on my car through the barometric pressure. It actually increases with that. It's very subtle. It's subtle, but it's there. No, all these cool reasons, the fact that you can change the runner lengths of the trumpets on there to adjust torque and peak power, that's all cool. All of it's irrelevant, though, because they just sound cool. They sound amazing. There's nothing else that sounds like that. I mean, the intake noise from the throttles is literally louder than the exhaust, and it's fantastic. That's why you do that. So he's got ITBs on this Prius engine. He's got a different aftermarket cam in it. Can you believe that they make aftermarket cams for 2016 Priuses? I didn't even know that was a thing, but it exists and he has it. And with all of this combined, it does 9,000 RPM, and it was in a Prius, and he's making about 140 horsepower, but that's pretty quick in a little car like that. That car can't weigh more than 2,100 pounds, if that. That's pretty darn quick, honestly. And, power to weight ratio, it's the good stuff. And here, I could tell you about how cool it sounds, but this is audio. I can actually play, like I can make you listen to it. Here, check it out. Here is what that Prius sounds like, that Prius engine, and it's absolutely, it's cool. Just listen to it. Oh man. That was in a Prius. Like when I see a Prius driving down the road, I don't think of that sound. I really don't. I swear I don't. It really doesn't come to mind. And yet here we are. Can you imagine that? I know. That's a Prius. Was parts of a Prius. Now, but this is cool though, because this could be the new secret swap. Like everyone's all gung-ho on K24 swaps. K24, K-Series, Honda K-Series motor swaps have been popular for like a decade now. And they were really cool because they were, it's a junkyard swap. You get it for a couple $100. You do a couple things and you put it in your Civic. Hell, you put it in your S2000. I'm thinking about doing that. That might be cool. But that's cool. But they've become so popular that they're not cheap anymore. At least they're not as cheap. They're still, I was looking at K24s on eBay. And they're still like $900 for the RBB high compression JDM ones, which that's kind of the one you want. At least that's the closest to the one that you want here in the United States market as well. And that's still pretty cheap compared to, other engines, but not this cheap. That's not like $400 cheap. That's not $150 cheap if you get it like for a flat rate price at a junkyard. We're talking dirt cheap, 9,000 RPM. And no one's saving these Priuses because the battery packs, they get old and it's expensive to replace the battery packs. And so people just junk the cars because the cost to replace the battery pack, sure, the car's probably got a lot of life left in it, but the cost to replace that battery pack exceeds the market value of the cars. And they just junk it. Whatever. I'll just take it to the junkyard. I'll get a couple $100 for it. No big deal. No one's saving these cars. And those engines are probably pretty lightly used considering that they live in a hybrid powertrain They're not on all the time when the car's driving. They're on infrequently. They're on here and there to boost acceleration and to charge up those batteries. So honestly, not a bad idea. Now, this guy, David in New Zealand, did have to make some modifications to the front pulley assembly to mount some accessories because as the engine sits in a Prius, it doesn't actually run like an alternator and some other stuff, so he had to build some custom bracketry. He fabbed that up, got it done, works great, 9,000 RPM in a little, like, tiny shoe of a car. It looks like I don't know what to explain what it looks like, but it's tiny, and it's screaming, and it's really fast, and it's hilarious because no one expects it. And then you say, yeah, it's got a Prius engine. Did you know your Prius could sound like this? I want to see someone who does these same mods to a Prius, but still in the Prius, not just the engine, in the actual Prius itself, because that would be pretty cool. Just throwing that out there. So anyway, there you go. This is a cool thing. This is all about grassroots motorsports. This is all about cool stuff like this. Now, this stuff wouldn't be possible if the EPA gets their way, by the way. So this is why the RPM Act is so important. And you really should listen here to this last segment of the show. We are going to talk a little bit about the RPM Act. I've mentioned it before on the show, but we're going to go more in depth. We're going to talk about how it relates to a famous YouTuber as well. So we'll get to that and more coming up right here on the Automotive ADHD Show.
And now for how things work with an engineer.
Engines. Spin.
And that was how things work with an engineer. For more of how things work, go to patreon.com/throttlewarrior.
All right, here we are rocking it for the third half of the Automotive ADHD Show. My name is Matt West. I'm here to talk about cars. That's what you are here to listen to. Those car sounds were, I would say they were sent in, but that was those were a little different. That was a friend of the show and a friend of mine, Tirso, drifting around the Pikes Peak International Raceway in his Lexus IS 300. I had the fortune to be riding shotgun for that run, and he is a big supporter of the show. And he said that he wanted a sticker from the show. So he said he wanted a sticker, and I said, well, hey, how about I give him a sticker and maybe also go drifting? That sounds like a fair deal. That sounds like a good plan, right? So that's what I did. I gave him one of the stickers, and we sent it around the Pikes Peak International Raceway at the Slush Motorsports Festival, which was a couple of weeks ago. And there was some very skillful driving on his behalf, and I was just clinging on to the bucket seat, just holding in, trying to not slide around too much. Gosh, that is so much fun. And yeah, I'm used to going fast around tracks in cars. I'm totally used to that. It doesn't scare me, but drifting is entirely different, especially if you're the passenger. I feel like being the driver is one thing. You're in control. You know where the car is going to go. But as a passenger, I mean, you're just kind of, it's the automotive equivalent of bull riding, really, if you're the passenger. And it's a whole lot of fun, and I love it. And we were, when we were drifting there, we were door to door with another guy, full tandem. Super cool stuff. Drifting's one of those motorsports that I haven't personally done myself, and oh man, you bet I want to do it. I'm working on it. One car at a time, one project car at a time. But trust me, I'll get there. So anyway, by the way, if you want to send in your car sounds, you can do that. You don't have to give me a ride around a racetrack drifting. You don't have to. You can. I would encourage you to. I wouldn't talk you out of it. But, or, you could do the rational thing, which is send the car sounds in, facebook.com/automotive ADHD. Send your car sounds into the show. If email is more your thing, you can email them to me as well, matt@throttlewarrior.com. Check it out. You get entered for a chance to win the sticker, the gift card, the keychain, and of course, you get to have your car sounds played right here on the show, on the podcast for the world to hear, and on the radio. Tell your friends, tell your buddies, hey, my car was on the show. You should check it out. I love it. And so that's all good stuff there. And now one last thing here I got to hit on, okay, for this last segment of the show is really important. And I talked a couple weeks ago about the RPM Act, which is an act that we need to support as car enthusiasts. I steer away from politics for the most part on this show, except when necessary. And when those politics involve enthusiast car stuff, they rarely do, but when they do, I think it is our duty to protect things like modifying cars and motorsports and all of that stuff. That's why you're here, right? The RPM Act, by the way, is the Recognizing the Protection of Motorsports Act, and it's really important. Now, let me give you some context here, because this ties into Rich Rebuilds. He's a well-off, well-to-do YouTuber, and he is famous for doing things with Teslas. He's famous for doing stuff with Teslas. He did a V8 swapped Tesla project called ICE-T, internal combustion engine T for Tesla, ICE-T. I like it. It's clever, right? So he did a V8 swap, LS swap Tesla. That was cool. That was very cool. So now he's trying to one-up himself, and he's doing a Cummins diesel swapped Tesla. This is cool. He took an entire diesel truck, chassis, transmission, engine, the whole thing. Basically, I believe it was a old Chevy-based diesel truck, and decided to basically just take the whole body off of it, the frame off of it, and drop a Tesla on top of it. And that's super cool. I like it. I'm all for creative stuff like this. Now, what's interesting in the world of internet drama that, I don't know if people are too into it, but he allegedly got a letter from the EPA saying that he was, by doing this, violating the Clean Air Act. And it turns out, as he looked into it, this letter was a hoax. Someone else sent it to him. He claims to not be the proprietor of the hoax. He says someone else sent this to him. He thought it was legit, so he called up a lawyer, had them look at it, and they said, "Yeah, this isn't real. This isn't the EPA. It's not the real thing." But the reason this is happening is because a couple weeks ago, I also mentioned a story about a gentleman who had his Dodge pickup truck with a diesel crushed by the state of New Jersey. And my thoughts on that were, you're just going to have to listen to it. You're going to have to listen to that show. I went really in depth on it. I gave you a lot of context, a lot of what I think about that. Now, the short version of that is, I don't think the state should be telling you what you can do with a vehicle designed for competition and off-road use. Okay, so that's the thing. He had the vehicle, his Dodge pickup. He removed the emission stuff, and so he said, "Okay, I will take it off the street." He received a warning about using it on the street because, well, you can't do that. It doesn't have emissions. That's fair. That's fair. The state has jurisdiction over its roads, over, registering vehicles. It has jurisdiction on that. That's no problem. The fact is, when he decided to forfeit his registration and only use the truck in tractor pull events and trailer it to the events, which, by the way, happen on private property with other modified vehicles doing the same thing, the state said, no, you either fix it or we crush it. That's where I thought the overstep in government there happened. Now, this is becoming, because that story was pretty high profile, I think somebody sought to kind of recreate that here, or maybe freak out Rich Rebuilds, the YouTuber, maybe freak him out. There's a theory that he could have done this and staged it. I doubt it. He's decently upfront with everything that he does, but hey, it's the internet, right? But that said, what's interesting is when he got his lawyer, and when he contacted a lawyer who's familiar with both motorsports and law, and asked about this, the lawyer told him, yeah, this thing was fake, and you can't. This doesn't make sense. But also, he had a very interesting interview and discussion with his lawyer, which he posted up on his YouTube channel, and it's about a 20-minute interview, and I thought it was actually fascinating seeing the lawyer's opinion. His name's the lawyer, by the way, great guy. His name is Alan. And he is also the owner of SQ Motorsports, and they build hot rods and race cars. So he's a lawyer, and he's a car guy, and he races, and that's cool. I love that. That's awesome. So here's a quick thing on this. I'm going to play a very short clip from their interview, though I do encourage you to check out the entire interview. It's definitely worth your time to see some more of a legal analysis on governments regulating cars for competition use. And this, we'll get to it here. This ties into the RPM Act, but before we get to the rest of that, here is this. Give this a listen.
The EPA wants the ability to ban at the manufacturer level. The EPA wants the ability to go after the manufacturers of performance equipment that interferes with emissions regulations. And as long as race cars are legal, they can't do that. They have to prove in order to prove a violation, they have to prove that it was used on the highway or it was used in an inappropriate manner.
So what he's essentially getting at is that the EPA doesn't like race cars because they want to regulate these. They want to regulate these things. But by having the clause for race use only, for competition use, for off-road use, you'll see those all kind of interchangeably used. By having that clause, you then have that means it's on the burden of the EPA to prove in a court of law that that vehicle was used unlawfully on the street and not for racing or competition use. Now, if they can say, nope, you can't use it for racing or anything, that means any modification that would tamper with the emission system, that would maybe be a performance modification, that would be, for instance, swapping, doing a motor swap. You would be bound to the emissions regulations of whatever car that motor came out of. It would have to comply to that. And it would be a huge nightmare for anyone doing fun grassroots projects, doing grassroots motorsports. It would be an absolute nightmare to work around that. And it would all but kill if the EPA had this power. All the RPM Act does is limit the EPA's authority to regulate things for competition and off-road use. It has nothing to do with road use. But by preserving the use of competition and stuff, you also preserve all of the laws around manufacturers who have to make the parts, exhaust systems, things like that, making tunes, for instance, doing aftermarket ECUs, wiring harnesses, any of this stuff could fall under the umbrella of the EPA's authority if not for the RPM Act. And that's why the RPM Act is super important, because the EPA basically says, yeah, racing's fine. You just can't take a road car and modify it for track use, which I argue that's still government overstep, because at the end of the day, you own that car, especially if you own it and the bank doesn't. You don't have a lien on it or anything. You own that, and you're going to go use it on private property. They shouldn't have any say in that, but they shouldn't be allowed to have any say in that. And again, that's what the RPM Act is seeking to prevent. They want to limit the EPA's authority. The EPA says, yeah, racing's fine as long as you have a custom-built race car from the ground up. So custom tube-built chassis, everything from the ground up. You have to develop it. Oh, but guess what? You also have to develop the engine. You can't use an engine that was designed for road use inside a road car. That means not only as an enthusiast, like, yes, some car enthusiasts might have the fabrication knowledge to go build their own tube frame chassis in their own race car. In fact, my friend Wesley Kagan, he was on this show way back in December talking about his Koenigsegg free valve build that he was doing in his garage. Fascinating interview. If you're new to the show and you haven't heard it, that's a good one to listen to. That's a really good one to listen to. Wesley, not only did he build his own Koenigsegg free valve and put it on a Miata, he also built his own tube frame Formula One style race car. Totally from scratch. He designed it, everything, welded it, bent the tubes, designed it all in CAD. He even made his own inboard suspension. I mean, super cool stuff. Most guys don't do what he does. And basically, the only way it would be legal is if you did that. You built your own car, or you bought a car that was purpose-built like that. But then you would also have to develop the engine, because you couldn't. Now, Wesley, he took a Mercedes V12 and stuffed it into the back of this Death Trap tube cart thing, and it was awesome. But that wouldn't even be legal, because he would have to develop his own engine. Now developing an engine from the ground up, imagine not using any already existing manufactured part from an engine. And imagine that. You would have to cast the block, you would have to design it, cast it, do all this stuff. I mean, that is squarely out of the range of the DIY enthusiast. I mean, do you have a engine casting forge in your backyard? I didn't think so. So if you do, I want to talk to you. That's awesome, but I doubt it. So anyway, basically what you need to do, what I can do, what you can do, anyone can do as an enthusiast. I'm going to continue mentioning this on the show. I may not go as in-depth as to occupy an entire segment of the show with this, but I'm going to continue mentioning it here on the show that, hey, we need to support the RPM Act, preserve motorsports in the United States. Now, there's a great website I found, by the way, called SaveOurRacecars.com. And that's really cool because from that website, again, saveourracecars.com, you can see who your congressional representatives are, your state legislators. You can see all of this stuff. And you don't even have to, if you want to write a letter to them, you can write your own letter. You don't really have to because they have a prepackaged letter that you put together. You just click right on your lawmaker. It's a prepackaged thing. You put in your zip code. It says who that needs to be sent to. You're like 3 or 4 clicks away from just sending that as it is. It would take you 15, 20 seconds if you really tried to get that sent off. At least let the legislators know what we think about this, because one thing that was also brought up in Rich Rebuild's interview with Alan there, the lawyer, was that the people in Congress aren't really aware of this. This is not center attention for them. There's a world of politics that has preoccupied them with other things, and those are all political things we don't talk about on this show. But this is a little footnote, like, oh, yeah, I heard something about that. Yeah, the race car thing. Okay, yeah, whatever, right? This isn't on their radar. And even the ones who've heard of it, again, this is not a pressing issue for them. Let's make it a pressing issue for them by letting them know. If enough people let them know, well, hey, there you go. That's how things get made. That's how laws get made. And it would be a hell of a lot harder to undo all of this if the EPA has their way, and then we have to undo all of it. That's going to take years, and meanwhile, they're going to be coming down on anyone who even posts, YouTubers, whatever, grassroots guys posting, yeah, here's my race car, I did a motor swap. Look, the state of New Jersey, in that story I talked about a couple weeks ago with that guy's diesel truck, the state of New Jersey found that truck by scouring Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. That's what they were. Clearly they have someone they pay to go on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and look for stuff that's not compliant, and then go crush those vehicles if they're not brought into compliance. The fact that they're doing that means they could scale that up. So anyway, there it is for the week. The RPM Act. We need to get on this. If you like cars at all, this isn't even if you just like racing. This is if you like being able to modify cars at all. Because bear in mind, if they ban this stuff entirely and you can't do the racing, then you can't also, the manufacturers who make most of their money from doing the racing, who might be selling you your high-flow cat kit that is legal for the street for your street car, well, they're not going to be making enough money on that to sustain as. This is going to put a lot of people out of business too. This is relevant even if you are not in the racing scene yourself and you just want to put some nice wheels on your car, a high-flow cat, maybe, switch it to run ethanol, which, by the way, is a great environmental decision, in my opinion. Ethanol's fantastic. You wouldn't be able to do that if the EPA had their way. So anyway, there you go. That is it for this week's show. I really appreciate you tuning into the show. And again, exciting news for the Patreon subscribers. Those of you on the Patreon will, if you want to, I need you to send me your address through Patreon, and I can send you a keychain, though I'm going to, that is limited to 1 keychain per person. Also, if you happen to join the Patreon anytime in the month of October, hey, keychain might be up for grabs. I'm just saying, you should check it out, patreon.com/Throttle Warrior. And remember to check out my interview last week with Emmy Award-winning television producer and director of the last independent automaker documentary series, Joe Ligo. It is a fantastic interview. You really don't want to miss that. So you got to check that out. Now, anyway, I want to thank you for listening. Remember to give this show a rating on Spotify. 6 stars. Let's blow it up. Let's make them add a whole new rating just for this show. And I will see you right here, same time, same place next week.